The exit light. A hovering beacon set in darkened places to inform you there is always a way out. But don't go just yet. We have such wonderful things to show you. Welcome to the Exit Light Podcast. Hello, Eli Beals here. First, I want to say thank you for listening. I know it's been a long time since I've released an episode, and for that I am sorry. But I suppose I needed a moment to recharge my battery, my creative energies, I guess. Moving forward, I plan to release an episode that features one story, narrated and written by me, until some collaboration happens. I don't know. I don't really have a plan for it. All I do know is that I truly enjoy making them, and I hope that you enjoy listening. And so with that, I will present you tonight's story titled The Treehouse. Sometimes the answers we seek are more haunting than the questions that drive us to go looking for them. In this tale, we journey with a man to his hometown. As he retraces his steps, the events of that day come cascading back, leading him to a grim discovery. I'm standing at the entrance to the apartment complex I once lived in almost 3 decades ago. This wasn't supposed to be a trip down memory lane, but for the past week and a half, I had been obsessing about this place. Waking suddenly in the middle of the night covered in sweat, sometimes screaming. It was getting so bad that I had taken to sleeping on the couch so as not to bludgeon my wife next to me. This didn't stop the dreams, however, and upon waking each time I could only retain little fragments, like snowflakes, that evaporated after a few moments. All I could seem to hold on to was a stark structure built into a gargantuan oak tree in a field of tall blonde grass, a treehouse. I know it doesn't sound all that terrifying, but there was something sinister about it, and there was an answer lying in wait if I can just go and see it again. If it's still there, of course. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's been paved over to make way for a strip mall or something. But then again, I know it is. I was determined to settle this once and for all by simply driving upstate to satisfy this itch that only grew, casting long shadows in my mind. My wife, a deeply spiritual person, encouraged this purging of my past so I could finally move on from whatever was tormenting me. I called the shop and informed my staff that I would be out for a few days for some personal time, and I hit the road. It's very nostalgic, seeing familiar roads and sights along the way. I remarked to myself how little and how much has changed since I drove up this way last. First thing I did upon crossing the town border was roll down the windows and let the balmy summer air rush in, and with it, childhood memories. Instantly reminded of endless summers filled with days at the swimming pool, huge slices of watermelon, and of course, adventures with my friends. I found my childhood home easily, a sprawling apartment complex of earth tones, arranged alphabetically in a huge figure 8, largely populated by students and small families, I assume. Just beyond the entrance is the daycare facility called the Little Rascals. My time there was unique, an amenity I've never seen anywhere else. I remember they played classical music during nap time and served casseroles for lunch. The sign facing the street marks the invisible line I was not, as a kid, allowed to cross. And just as I did nearly 30 years ago, I hesitate and turn in the direction of my unit, all the way down at the end near a huge wooden wall that did little to block sound of passing trains. Maybe when this excursion is over I'll go take a look, but for now, I am eager to see the thing that has been pervading my dreams. The sidewalk ends abruptly into a narrow dirt path that wends down through a dense copse of trees, over a creek and out into an open field. As I walk, the memories come easier, and as I draw closer to my destination, a tinge of dread begins to rise. I can almost see it like an overlay in front of me, figures wheeling past me like ghosts. We were on our bikes, and so it wouldn't take long to get there. According to Fabian, the corner market was just past the field, and a few blocks further. The quest was, of course, for penny candy. Our meager pool of loose change would barely afford us a full-size candy bar to split 3 ways. I stop and try to recall the third kid's name. It was me, Fabian, of course. I remember that name. And also there was... what was his name? Nothing is coming to mind, and I continue through the trees. The creek is a mere trickle that I hop over easily. I smell crayfish, a briny earthiness that reminds me of my uncle. He'd boil them in a huge pot, and after a few minutes a shrill keening could be heard amidst the billows of steam. My uncle told me it was the crawdads screaming, and would laugh at my look of absolute horror. I smile, amused by how a smell could start a chain reaction of memory like that. To this day, I still refuse to eat crayfish. The shade of the trees gives way to open skies, and the summer's hot sun pushes down on me like a huge hand. I didn't bring anything to drink, but I don't have far to go. The name of the third kid is still bugging me. It's there, hovering at the edge of my recollection like a mosquito flitting around my ear. I can see him on a red bike. He's wearing a shirt, like a baseball jersey. The number 24, yellow on green. Was it Rick? Ricky. It was Ricky, like Ricky Henderson. That was his favorite shirt because the baseball player had the same name as him. Yeah. Like a plug being pulled from a drain. Instead of emptying, the basin fills from a dark void from the pipes below. The memories are cold, brackish things that gurgle out in viscous pulses. Now that the name was there, that day's events keeps pace with my quickening steps. Just past this bank of trees and towards the distant hills will be the treehouse. At first I think it's not there, but as my eyes adjust, I see the dark shape engulfed in the dense boughs of the massive oak tree. It is close to 100 degrees out here, maybe more, but I feel suddenly cold as I gaze at the place that my mind has avoided for so long. For a while I just stare at it, remembering that first time I saw it. We had all stopped to regard the distant structure, just about a football field's length away. After a quiet moment, we consulted Fabian on the matter, who shrugged and said the ladder was busted according to his brother. After a few moments, we moved on. The siren call of sugar was stronger than the mystery before us, and soon we found ourselves at the corner market. The proprietor was not enthusiastic about our meticulous sifting through the barrels for choice items, and even less so as we piled the selections onto the counter. We could have gotten away with a few extra pieces at his expense, but didn't lack that kind of foresight or criminal consideration. Plus, the purchase meant very little to the shop owner. But he took our money, and we sat out front on the curb to enjoy the spoils of the day. As the collective sugar levels rose, so did the interest in that treehouse. Fabian did his best to discourage the idea. His face unusually somber, but the effects of peer pressure won. And so we all went back the way we came, leaving the dirt path to approach the treehouse. Like all those years ago, I feel that same sense of watchfulness about it as I move closer. It was old. The planks were rough and colorless like wrinkled, desiccated skin. Small square holes on either side of the doorway peer out like hollow eye sockets watching my approach. The rungs that zigzag up the tree are still there, and were at this point beginning to be engulfed by the tree itself, as if it were slowly devouring them. They say everything looks smaller when you return to a childhood place, but this tree and the house perched above still retains its massive scale. I had never seen an oak tree this large. Standing in its shade, it might as well be night, the dense leaves and boughs above blocking the sun so thoroughly. As I reach for a handhold to climb, I can hear the echoes of my own voice, urging Ricky on to do as I am doing now. Ricky was probably the most amped up from the sugar and felt braver, volunteering to climb up and see inside. But as he touched the first plank, he glanced back, uncertainty and fear in his face. Fabian began clucking like a chicken, and I joined him, flapping my arms, laughing. This seemed to be the impetus for Ricky's climb. He progressed slowly and stopped a few times to look down, and even at this distance we could see he was trembling. But he kept climbing, and when he made it to the landing, he stood and waved his arms, hooting at us. And then he went in. I'm climbing slowly, admitting to myself that I'm not in the greatest shape. Perhaps more careful to test out the old planks before putting my full weight on them. I wonder what I would do if any of them broke. I'd go to the hardware store and buy more planks to nail to this thing, I think grimly. I have to see what's in there. I just have to. After a very long minute, we began to worry. Hollering up at the treehouse for Ricky, as soon as we mustered the nerve to climb up ourselves, Ricky emerged from the gloom of the treehouse and leaned against the railing, about to yell something. The railing gave way with a dry, snapping sound and swung wide like a gate opening, and Ricky fell, tumbling forward like a high diver. He didn't scream or anything, he just plummeted to the ground and landed with a dull thud. Frozen with shock, unable to process what had just happened, myself and Fabian just stared at our friend's body lying in the dirt. Before we could even decide what to do, Ricky sat up, then stood and walked calmly over to us. From what we could see, he was completely unharmed. A mixture of uncertainty and relief washed over us as we had just witnessed our friend fall from nearly 3 stories. Ricky just smiled and picked up one of the bikes lying on its side, and Fabian called out,
"Hey, yours is the red one."
"Oh, yeah, I forgot,"
Ricky said distantly.
Are you okay?"
I asked.
"Fine. How are you?"
Ricky replied in an almost disconnected cadence.
I'm okay. Maybe we should get home. It's getting late,"
I stammered. We watched Ricky straddle his bike and push off. He wobbled a bit, but was soon speeding down the dirt trail. He then shouted something that made us exchange expressions of incredulity.
It's like riding a bike. You never really forget.
And he laughed as he paddled off. I pulled myself up to the landing. The railing that had given way so many years ago was still hanging away from the platform, pointing down like a crooked finger from years of gravity. I looked down, still wondering how a person could just fall like that and get up without injury. Collected, I turned to the open doorway with resolve, stepping carefully towards the door, cringing as the old wood groans beneath my weight. The last thing I need is a plank to splinter to cause me to trip or be lacerated by a rusty nail. As I get closer, I can smell something, faint and somehow familiar, like old furniture, slightly sweet and at the same time putrid. I suck in a breath and duck inside the treehouse. It takes a moment to adjust to the darkness, and the smell grows stronger, almost palpable. There in the far corner I see it, a small form, arms crossed over its chest, knees pulled up, like an unborn fetus. My mouth goes sour. I can feel bile rising in my guts, and the hairs on my arms and neck turn electric. It is a young boy wearing a green baseball jersey emblazoned with the number 24. It's Ricky. The real Ricky. His face. Oh God, his face. Mouth stretched open in a silent howl. Eyes, long bereft of fluid, staring bleakly upwards. What his last moments of life were like, I cannot say. Whatever it was that Ricky saw that day was terror I have never known, imparted to me only secondhand, and the fear grips my lungs and I can barely breathe. I can't do much but utter a frog-like croak and hardly remember my frantic climb down from the treehouse. Memories of the subsequent weeks after that day come flooding back. Ricky's parents were brutally stabbed to death in their sleep. It was in the papers and the news. Authorities assumed it was a murder-kidnapping. At the time, there was no trace of Ricky. But I know that was not the case. Whatever had tumbled out of that treehouse that day was not my friend. And I know another thing as well. This knowledge will not put my mind to rest for a long, long time, if ever.